And thank you to Rai for having all of us. Let me start off, by just talking about a little bit about the gig economy. So when the panel kind of got together, I think a lot of us asked the question, what is gig employment? So 85% of India's economy actually works on informal jobs, which are single one-time jobs and essentially add back to the economy, but there isn't a formal employment contract. What you're seeing over the last maybe about 10 years is a lot of change that's happened because people have now started to put together technology platforms that bring these kind of informal workers into a structure or a formal environment. There are various tiers, and obviously it starts off with our junior most workforce, which is really the one that delivers the consumer experience when it comes down to retail. And then as you go on, there could be single project people who would work in either the field of technology or even in L&D, that matter, or marketing. A lot of consultants who help in specific areas. There's a recent BCG study that actually has put together saying if we had gig employees actually contributing the way that they should, we could add almost about 1.5% to the GDP of India. Now, while there are a lot of advantages to obviously gig employees coming on board, there are also some challenges. And as a result of it, there is going to be, especially when it comes to the organization structure piece, and it comes down to the whole learning and development section, which is what we're going to kind of try and address today through the panel. Sorry about the adjustment. If you just give me a minute. All right, I hope that's okay, Meenakshi.
Yes, it's better.
Yes, okay. Yes, Seema, yes.
All right, so let's start off, with a few questions, and I'm sure that all the panelists have had some experience with gig employment. So Neelam, let's start with you. Given that you're in the most new age business of all of us, what has been your experience with getting gig employees, and what was the reason why you started with this?
So thank you, Seema, and thank you for that introduction. Thanks, Rai. So I think, Seema, gig workforce has always been there. So if, you very rightly said that in L&D, we use a lot of coaches, leadership consultants, or for that matter, for marketing, you use a lot of website blog writers. So that has always been there. But I think, in my belief, 2-3 things that contributed to it surging up. One is, you're right, the online platforms and the ability for all of them to come together. Secondly, I think COVID. So now that the normal employee is working from home and I'm comfortable with it, my comfort with somebody else working remotely and being able to deliver I think that trust has gone up, right? So I think COVID just accelerated it. It would have happened. Maybe it would have taken another 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but COVID just accelerated. So that's the part of the employer looking at it. And that's the reason why we also hired. So, we need a lot of workforce that needs to come. And the permanent job, I must say 5 years or 6 years back when I joined, everybody wanted, even a delivery boy wanted to have a permanent job, even not stay. But today they're okay with it. Today, I think it's cool to say I'm a freelancer or I'm a consultant. Maybe 10 years back, it was not. So I think both ways, we got comfortable with it. They got comfortable with it. There is no societal pressure to have a permanent 9 to 6 job for them. And there is no stigma that we have that if you are a freelancer, you may not deliver whatever it is. And that kind of contributed to the growth of both us and the economy. So I think that really helped us.
Thank you so much, Neelam. Nandini, you come from a more traditional retail kind of a setup, but you've also talked about, an increase in terms of gig employment. What to your mind has added, to your increase in the gig employment category?
Very good evening to everyone.
So I think, apart from what Neelam just mentioned about COVID being one of the reasons, I think another big reason is also startup companies. Startup companies really don't have, that much of, I would say they would not want to invest initially on huge manpower. So they end up hiring gig employees to be able to deliver on certain projects and, certain key deliverables that are there where they come, finish something and then just leave. So I think, startups is one of the reasons. The other reason is, a lot of millennials that are there who see, full-time employees working extra hours, long hours. I think, the whole perception that has been created about full-time employees working in organizations has also led millennials to think that they don't want to work full-time. They would rather work in multiple organizations, working on various projects, learning more, being free, giving themselves some free time as well. So I think that is another reason that I could think of. And apart from that, I think a lot of freelancing platforms that are available today, where various consultants and freelancers can actually work on and reach out to various organizations so that they can be hired to actually do contract work. So I think I would say these are three, apart from COVID being one of the reasons. Yeah.
Okay. So interestingly, we also have Dhanashree, who's from banking and finance. And while traditionally all of us understand retail, Dhanashree, you wanted to, help us with where has Bharti AXA been able to use gig employees effectively?
So I must say that, I do have employees in my team who are gig employees. And what I want to call out, building on what's been said earlier, I think a lot of times we equate gig with contract or short term. And from where gig word itself comes from, it's about gathering experiences for me, specific skill sets. And unfortunately, it's still not seen in the same light. Okay. So to what Neelam said about the, need for contract employment or, the discomfort with it, I think it's still not as comfortable, because I would just say that if all of us as HR professionals were to review some of the CVs and were to hire, okay, or in our own profiles, we have these 1 year, 6 month stints, okay, I don't think we've still changed the lens of, still looking at the resume traditionally that, 6 months, 1 year, instead of looking at that, what has the employee gathered as experience in that span of time, okay? In my team, for example, I struggled with getting resources. I wanted someone who's an L&D expert. And unfortunately, the capabilities within are still at a very, very junior level. If I want someone with experience to come on board, it's still a struggle. So finding skill is a challenge. Having said that, at Bharti AXA, in capabilities like underwriting or, for example, operations, we have experimented, but there is still a lot of work to do, not because of, lack of openness, but I think from skills which are available, the need for something which is more long-term, the need for something which is still perpetual, changes which have not happened from a mindset perspective on how we address performance, and how we are open. A lot of regulations in terms of employment or having dual employment or 2-3 employments have not really undergone a change fundamentally.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's really about getting higher level skill in, even if it's specific to a job or which you may not have need of as a full-time role, because it's very specific to a certain target role, and that may not be easily available for a full-time role or have a need for a full-time role. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am. And I'm actually calling out that, a gig can also be full-time without the 8-hour spectrum, so there is need of redefining that itself.
Sure.
Saying I need I need a certain marketing expertise, but I need it for a certain period of time, hours per day or whatever. Okay,
correct.
but I need it over the year or 2 years. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So Nandini, just coming back to you, within your structure of traditional retail, can you talk about some of the roles that you've actually used? So Dhanashree gave a great example of her own team. Within your organization, what kind of roles, have you been able to actually use for gig employees?
Sure. So I can immediately think of 3 roles. So one is, of course, in the HR team where, we are just building the entire HR team and there was a need to close positions quickly. So we actually got someone who's already, doing multiple projects to actually work with us to close on certain positions. So basically someone in the TA area, talent acquisition area. So that's one position I can think of. So it's like for a short term, but not necessarily working only for us. The second position that I can think of is we have a new legal head. And the earlier legal head, basically has retired. So we have extended his expertise as a mentor, working with us for a period of time. So that's another position that I can think of. And the third that we recently hired was someone in the visual merchandising expertise area. So that is, very specifically on certain deliverables that we are looking at. To enhance the entire visual merchandising and displays in our stores. So these are 3 positions I can think of where we've hired gig employees over the last year and a half. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Those are pretty senior positions.
Yes.
Which actually takes me to my next question. So while, there's a value with people coming in with very specific skill, as L&D professionals, we all understand that there is an underlying culture and an underlying work ethic that the company actually, breeds over a period of time. And consumer experience or consumer loyalty, feeds off that. And if you look at lots of examples of companies, people actually go back because of the people. So I'm just going to take the next question to Isuru. Can you talk, Isuru, a little bit to me about what have you seen as differences that come into the organization because of this blend of full-timers and gig employees?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think this also is very much dependent on the sort of sector or business that you're working in. If I look at it from an IKEA perspective, when we look at the skills that we require that we don't have in the organization today, and IKEA as a business in India is currently expanding quite extensively. And what we're finding today is that we don't have the skills or the qualities to be able to, for example, build up our units, to be able to showcase what we want to really show our customers the full width and depth as we have in other countries. So what we do is we bring in freelancers for a very short period of time. It could be between 3 to 6 months, where they come in and their purpose and sole assignment is to secure that the unit is ready to open and ready to invite customers in. So when you look at the skill sets that they bring in, it's a very high level amount of skills and experience that they bring into the organization. And without that, we probably wouldn't be able to open up the stores that we have in India today. And going forward, we probably have the same challenges as well. So for us, that experience is quite pivotal and quite vital. And we don't find that today. So using the gig economy, this really allows us to really be able to continue on our expansion plans without having any hindrance.
But do you think there is do you face a challenge in terms of blending, people who are not from within with your existing employees?
To be honest, no. We've not really had any challenges in this way. And for us, when we talk about these freelancers, they're actually people who actually worked in IKEA before as well, who've actually built a career within IKEA and then gone out and said, actually, now I want to be a freelancer. And they're probably perfect examples of gig workers because they value the fact that they can, work when they want to, they can earn the right amount of money that they want to, and they're also happy to go from one place to another. So coming to your question, is there a difficulty for us to integrate them into the existing workforce? We've not seen that ourselves.
Sure. Saurabh, how about you at Shopper Stop? Do you see a challenge as you're going into, a blended workforce? Are you seeing any challenges in terms of, just making sure that your culture and your organization structure and, the whole talent management, all of that part, is there any risk you see by integrating the blended workforce? Saurabh? All right, I think we've lost Saurabh for a bit. So Sonal,
Am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Okay, you're back. Yes, Saurabh.
Okay. Thanks. So that was just an example of how technology can work at any given point of time and why you require people around to support you in such cases when business dynamics change. So, it purely depends on the complexity, confidentiality, and the criticality of the project. But yes, we certainly see that the overall percentage of the gig employees is going up, and it's going to be higher now. I guess challenge would be reduced if we are able to bring the gig employee up on the curve or bring aboard very quickly. When we are talking about culture piece of it, I think culture is nothing else but the way we treat people and the way they feel.
Are you seeing a challenge?
Come again?
Are you seeing a challenge currently?
So the challenge, that's what I'm saying, the challenge that happens is when we are getting people on board, you have to make them get on to the project very quickly, get comfortable with that team particularly, because they are going to be for a short time and they are going to get into that team, the working style of that team very quickly. And if that happens, the advantage is they get on the project very quickly. The biggest advantage that I have seen is we've seen employees who over a period, because of the culture, because of the warmth and connect that they have seen in Shopper Stop, at a later stage, they want to renew the contracts more and more. Secondly, over a period, if somebody has done, taken this piece, particularly to complete their higher education or for a short stint because they have returning mothers, they have shown interest in joining Shopper Stop back. And we have had cases where employees have joined from a contract to becoming a permanent employee, or somebody who had taken a break in between for a couple of years have come back and demonstrated that interest. I think that's the biggest advantage of having a gig employee.
Okay. Anything that you see as a challenge?
I think the kind of culture or the kind of engagement, the kind of warmth, could be a challenge. If second, there are people who would want to just connect professionally, would not really want to get into the main line or mainstream, because they are just doing it as an additional or an add-on kind of a project. So I think that's one. And second is the formal structure, in terms of the performance appraisal, or as just some of the panelists mentioned, that how do you see the other processes or compliances in line? Those are yet to come up the curve. We are not matured as a market for those things.
Sure. Yeah, I believe Dhanashree mentioned that we still don't look at gig employees as a part of the workforce, really. And so I think we need to do some work around that.
I think the key lies in seeing, rather than looking at the tenure, look at their exposure. Rather than looking at the kind of intellect, we need to relook at the talent and the skill they bring.
Sure.
That's where the crux lies.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Sonal, how about you at VMart? What are you seeing as, the differences that you're seeing between your full-time workers and the gig employees?
Seema, so gig working phenomena is now trending over the last few years, I believe, and now ideally occupies around 30 to 40% place in an organization structure. And mind you, it was not something that companies sought out as a strategy and saved them for us. It's only in the last 18 months or so when we started taking things into account. It is then that we discovered that's how we need to operate, because that's where the economy is heading. So HR leaders are now, including us, we are getting our arms around lot many progressive technology platforms to develop and drive an agile workforce. and integrate the gig workers with the FTE, the full-time employees. And if you talk about the culture part of it, as previously mentioned, so there are two things basically that we are looking for. So the first part is the ownership and collaboration. Although it has been into the DNA of an organization culture from last, lot many years now, but then now the only difference is that previously it was one of the HR agenda, that it was the HR who was running the show. Ownership should be there, collaboration should be there. But with the incorporation of these gig workers into the economy and in the companies, I think it's time for HR to sit back, and now it should be in the top of the company's strategic agenda as to how we should attract and retain the right kind of gig talent with us.
Okay. Cool. All right. So just a question for the rest of the group. So because we've talked about why it's important to have gig employees, what are the differences that you see? I'm just going to go around the group, possibly starting with Neelam. Neelam, can you talk about a couple of practices that you have used at Bigbasket, which have helped you to see success in integrating your gig workforce with your existing workforce? Given that, it's such a young group, and normally gig employees are characterized by the fact that they come from paycheck to paycheck. What are some of the things that you've done from a skill development or a learning and development or a culture building point of view? There are two practices that people can actually walk away with, to help them integrate their workforces better.
Seema, if I think I think one is that I don't think I've ever introduced an employee or somebody in my team also saying that she's only here for 6 months.
Okay.
Or she's only working on, she's a contractual employee. I think Isha has joined us and Isha will work on the LMS content with us. So I think, and I don't think I or anybody at Bigbasket, we do it intentionally or we've been told to do it. But even when I go into a classroom and I have 25 participants, I can't make out if he's, on a contract or he's a full-time employee. So I think that helps you blend in because you're not looked down or looked up or however people want to look at you. I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is that though at times we know that these are, so we call them entrepreneur models, which means they can come and go whenever they want, kind of working. We've adjusted to their time of learning. So most of their L&D initiatives that happen with them, suppose they want to learn, is either that you learn or we do a workshop for you or something that because they have to come up a learning curve is online. So if you don't want to come, it's completely okay. But if you come, that'll be great because you'll come to know a lot of your, people that you have to work with. It is good. You can go out for a lunch or something. And that is something that has helped us have them settle down for a longer period of time. And I've realized once that initial inhibition of 1 or 2 months goes away, they're more welcome and they want to come to office to put a name to a face. So they want to say, who's Seema? I've written so many mails to you, but can we talk about it and can I have coffee? So I think these two things really helped us.
So I'm hearing onboarding needs to be done in the same format.
Yes.
And you need to make sure that they have alternates for their L&D. They can't just be expected to come into class, but you're giving them an alternate method of learning as well.
And most of them will turn up. It's just some amount of learning.
But you're giving them that learning that's specific to them.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Nandini, how about you? What are your thoughts on what can you do to make sure that these guys, that we're creating a more cohesive workforce?
So I'm going to answer this in two parts. So the first part is hiring of, I would say the short-term employees in the front end. So when we do that, we don't really differentiate because, the experience to the customer has to be the same across, irrespective of whether we are having someone short-term or full-time. So that remains the same. There's no difference in the induction or the orientation that we do for the rest. Coming to hiring of gig employees in the corporate office, normally we hire them to deliver on particular projects. So it becomes very difficult for us to really have a learning, program for them. But induction, yes, becomes very important. And these are very project based, right? So it becomes very important for us to ensure that we align the team that's going to work with them, whether it's the immediate team or stakeholders. We need to align them that this is going to be a short-term project, and you will have to support the individual to ensure that the individual is able to deliver. So I think the entire orientation or induction that we do has to revolve around that.
Sure.
So that the person is able to be successful. There has to be a buddy or a mentor with that person, so that wherever he or she is getting stuck, we are able to guide them. So I think that becomes very important. And anyways, we are hiring an expert to deliver on what the person has to deliver. So there's no question about, actually giving them a training intervention, because, they'll already be totally tied delivering on what they have to, and they would be on multiple projects, right? So they may not be keen to spend that much time on a training program. So I look at it from these two perspectives, that, at the corporate office, if it is for a specific time period, specific deliverables, then we just need to focus on ensuring the person is successful in that.
Sure. Thank you. Dhanashree, coming back to you, I think one of the questions would be that, and going from what Nandini also said, how would you use the gig employee to be able to impart the training that they come with? Because they come with specific experience. So rather than us training them, have you used them to impart training to your organization?
So not exactly them used for imparting training, but let me put it this way. I think we ourselves, if we are getting gig employees, we need clarity in what is it exactly that we expect. That has to be very, very sharp. That has to be very, very clear. Okay. There is the hand-holding time or the assimilation time has to be very, very fast. Okay. So I think more than them imparting training, it's like, this is a skill set that I'm getting on board. Right. And for that, I will support in whatever, so that I utilize this skill to the fullest. Okay, so that clarity is very important, and it increases the minute these roles get senior. Okay, you have to be very clear of what you expect and that expertise. Unfortunately, I think at senior levels, I have someone who heads my entire learning and development right now. And if I have hired that person for the skill set, this is like an interim role because someone has gone on maternity leave. So someone is with me for 9 months. And with that 9 months, then I don't have time to impart functional skills. But all I can do is assimilate them into the culture as much as I can, give them the context experience, give them the sectoral experience, which can happen, so that it's a win-win for both of us. Okay. And I think that clarity as a manager in a virtual setup is hard. It's tough. I mean, being a manager in a virtual setup is difficult. And in that, if it's, all of this, it makes it even tougher.
Sure. Cool. Isuru, would you like to add to some of the stuff that IKEA has done in order to be able to integrate the gig employees with their with the full-time employees?
Yeah, I think
specific practices that you can share.
Yeah, I think it goes back to also the last question that you asked: how have they been able to impart knowledge? I think when we talk about some of the freelancers that we bring in on a gig concept, they, of course, like I said, come in with a lot of experience. We are very clear with them what the assignment expectations are and what they need to deliver in that given time frame. But what's interesting is actually what happens then in reality when they are obviously delivering in their role, and also how much sponge absorbing there is from the people that are in the business, because they see these as individuals who come with years of experience that can impart knowledge. So here we find that people are spending a lot of time with them, getting to know, getting to understand their assignment, getting to understand how they can improve their skills and their knowledge. So actually, it's a win-win situation for all. We get a freelancer that is there delivering the assignment that we require, And at the same time, without having the expectation, they're also imparting knowledge on our co-workers, which we need, of course, in order to be able to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Saurabh, in one of the previous companies that I worked, we had got a lot of frontline guys who came in as gig employees. And what we realized was, and they came in from these tech platforms and they came in from a lot of these support companies, right? But what we realized was they came with an attitude that kind of went directly against the full-time employees. And we saw some amount of acrimony between the two groups. Have you faced that in Shopper Stop or not really?
I think you're on mute, Saurabh.
Yeah, is it audible now?
Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So just as I mentioned, I haven't seen a very stark challenge. Of course, every employee who joins, including whether it's a gig or a regular employee, they would take some time to come on board and to align themselves to the culture of the organization. But the biggest difference that I've seen is anyone who belongs to this gig workforce, the two things that they are actually working or they enjoy working as a gig employee is one, because they are getting the freedom, the space. They can choose their timings, they can choose their life. And second, they are also getting the kind of exposure to work for their passion. They're working for their passion and they're earning money. So if we use this particular stint with them, rather than exploiting them, maybe exploring their potential, one, they become a long-term prospect for us. Second, over a period, we have seen employees liking this particular culture. So all the best practices that the panel shared, assigning them a buddy, ensuring that they are, interacting with the stakeholder, making it absolutely clear. So that is all a part of transaction. But what you do beyond that, how do you make them feel that you're one of us rather than you're just here for a particular project? That goes a very, very long way. And so we've been focusing on their talent, their passion, and showing them that these are the possibilities if you want to join as a full-time employee at a later stage, and we can help you do that.
Okay. So just naturally making them feel that they can extend into the job if they want to.
Yes, because they bring in their passion, and I think that's what we want in them. The values and culture will come through the treatment that they see around.
Sure. Sonal, would you like to add to, a lot of the practices that the group has shared?
Yeah, definitely. And also being an L&D person, I would also like to touch upon the previous questions that you asked about the facilitation that we do to ensure that the learning transfer is happening. So when we talk about gig workers with niche skills, so, they come with a very set of fresh thinking, since they have worked with different organizations and are very much exposed to disruptive thinking. So what we basically do is that we ensure that any kind of gig projects or assignments we are giving, we align our high potential full-time employees so that they are exposed to that kind of a learning environment and exposed to that kind of strategic and analytical thinking, creativity, innovation. These are some of the skills that we would want to build upon. And we need to ensure that, there are ample opportunities of learning transfer, knowledge transfer that we are giving to the entire team, so that the learning does not stop the moment the project is off, they walk off the door. So communication is something, and facilitation is something that we really believe that we do.
Sure.
Apart from this, yes, certain talent acquisition practices, because since we are talking about a different kind of gig talent that we are planning to rope in, we have to ensure that our presence is there on online job boards. We have with us a contingent talent pool that can be pulled up anytime we have any gig assignment with us. So the TA team really needs to be fast and furious to hire the right kind of gig talent. And not only the TA, but the talent management practices also we need to revamp. So the regular check-ins, not only for the full-time employees, but also for gig workers is a must. And instilling strong project management competencies with strong feedback mechanism should be in place. if we want to integrate and develop strategic relationship with these gig employees.
Okay. All right. That's a great point. All right. So just, as a last question, and this is a tough one, right? And I'm just going to leave it open to the panel to answer as they feel right. How would you measure success or failure of a blended workforce? Have you guys been able to master anything at all that helps you to measure success or failure? Because, that's the question your CFO is going to ask. So while obviously at the start gate, it's always going to be a balancing of the one, getting your work done at the right time, right speed. And the second part is also obviously the amount of money that you pay out for a certain task, which may be required very specifically. Is there anything that you guys have learned over the period that can help our audience understand how to measure a blended workforce?
So Seema, if I may comment, and
sure.
I think with your experience in McDonald's itself, McDonald's is one company where, variable workforce has been, it's one of the companies in QSR where, almost 80-90% of the workforce is variable. Okay. And the minute that happens, that itself flows into your P&L in terms of your costs mix itself shifts into variable costs. And I don't think there is any other better explanation in being able to justify to the CFO. And in some ways, that's true of all of us. The minute it happens, the CFO is happier because it doesn't add to my fixed costs. Okay. The other thing is, of course, to make it work, a company like McDonald's had clear systems and processes in repeatable jobs in being able to do that. As the jobs get more complex, it gets a little bit more difficult. And that's where the truth lies in gig workforce. Because most often all of us don't have clarity. The systems are not well defined. Performance metrics are not clear. And in very practical terms, in hardcore HR, we want gig as cheaper employees. Okay. Yep. And unfortunately, that's not the case. We've still not moved into a skill or an experience mindset. Okay. Or an expertise mindset. Okay. The minute someone says it's a gig employee, the positioning we also have as HR professionals is, okay, break hai career mein, let me get at a cost cheaper. We still use very standard ways of, what was the last on salary? Therefore, okay, I can only give X increase. I can only give Y, or this is what, usko zarurat hai, and if this person will come on board. So a lot of that is also cultural. Second is P&L impact is very clear. But to make it a success, to utilize the benefit of it, a lot of it is cultural, specifically as jobs get more complex. I think retail is witness to, the more simpler, repeatable, it's easier. You will have a transition with the attrition at the ground level in terms of, so that movement keeps on happening. And unfortunately, that's where, gig is most often used. I'm more keen to look at, how can we utilize the benefits as we scale up the skills and look it across at a level, at a structural level. When we start looking at it, I think that's where the meat lies. Like a lot of global corporations have moved to, a skill set and therefore what I need. And then there are no questions of how is it different experience. This is a skill, this is a person, and it's my job to make it, as smooth as possible. Just like you walk into a restaurant, you don't feel, oh, I'm a new customer. You feel at ease. It's just like that.
Yeah, so I think that's my question to the panel really, is how do you guys are, 6 really strong leaders within the L&D and the HR space. How are you going to create value for that blended workforce, whether it's cultural, whether it's financial? How do you measure it? Right. And that's always been the question when it comes down to anything that's people related. So, I hear you, but the question is are there any ideas on how we can do this? And I think it's more an ideation. We may not have been able to practice it yet, but how can we get CEOs, how can we get CFOs to start thinking differently about this?
So I would like to add.
Yes, Nandini.
So I think what becomes very important is first for HR to understand how the whole gig workforce works. and then make it a part, ask the CEO, take the CEO's help to make it a part of the organization strategy.
Okay.
So when we are doing our, manpower planning for the year, it becomes very important to have discussions with each of our stakeholders to understand from them what are those roles which do not require full-time employment.
Okay.
Right? Today, most organizations work on projects, right?
Okay.
And is it possible for us to pick those roles, probably, let's say in IT, probably in HR, in e-commerce, in maybe inventory, in audit maybe, right? So what are those, positions which could allow us to hire gig employees, make it part of our manpower planning and strategy, and put across, like Dhanashree said, to the CFO or the CEO, that if these are the number of employees we are going to hire on part-time or gig model rather than hire them full-time, this is a saving we'll do. Against that, this is a benefit because we are going to hire experts, right?
Right.
The savings are, maybe we are not going to say, okay, we'll hire this person at a lower cost. But the fact is we're hiring them for a shorter period than a full-time employee.
Sure.
So for 1 year, we may be hiring them for 6 months. So we're still saving a 6 months cost.
So work the ROI model accordingly.
Exactly. So it has to become a part of the entire organization strategy. And like I said, HR needs to play a critical role in talking to people, making them understand the criticality of hiring gig employees and what's the benefit. And, you may end up getting better resources to deliver on a project than hire someone full-time. So I think this would really help make it part of the organization strategy. Yes.
Sure. Thank you. What about the rest of you guys?
Can I take Saurabh here? I think the pitch of, just as Dhanashree mentioned, they come at a cheaper cost. That pitch itself should be avoided because we are not looking out for a bonded labor. We are not looking out for people who come at a lesser cost. We are looking out for people who come with a higher talent, who are passionate about their work. And so just as Nandini also mentioned that when you look at the kind of output these people give in the amount of time which otherwise a regular employee would take, naturally that's the biggest return. That's point number one. Point number two is, as all of us agree, that culture is very, very vital. So the sooner we give this feeling of connect to this employee, he or she is later on going to think about getting into the mainstream. I'll just give you an example. We have a gig employee working in the L&D itself. She joined for 3 months. But within the 3 months, the kind of exposure we gave, it was not just some kind of a MIS or a back office or an Excel sheet, but we actually involved her in delivering programs, in creating those programs, going out and doing the research, all of that. She herself wants to now extend, and she has done it twice. She is now going to go for further studies. Now imagine the kind of connect we have left. I'm sure another year or two, this person is going to come back with a higher degree and with much more passion and intellect now, wanting to join Shopperstop. And there are umpteen numbers of examples. So what you do with the gig workforce during that limited time ensures a ROI for a very long term also.
Sure. Thank you. Sonal,
I was just going to also say, I think one area that also needs to be that needs to be looked at is also the impact it has, like we've been talking about, on the culture and the values of the organization. Because of course, depending on the percentage of gig workers versus full-time workers, will have an impact ultimately in what kind of culture you build in the organization, the kind of values the individuals bring into it. So I think for most organizations, that is probably another question mark on top of the financial implications it has on bringing them in. And that probably is not something that we can measure straight away. That happens over time. So what does that look like? Is that, do we see that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, or in 50 years' time, if the organization is to exist for that long? So what kind of culture you want to maintain in the organization, the kind of values of the individuals you bring, is probably a measure that also needs to be quite closely observed over this time period.
Sure. So we have to create something that can help you measure that impact.
I think we need to, but at the same time, it's also understanding what is the length of that measurement. because you
Yeah,
will
I mean,
never see
sure.
a
I mean, it has
difference.
to be digital,
Yeah.
it has to be actionable, I think, to my mind.
Completely. Yeah.
Right. Sonal?
Yeah, so everyone has worded it so well. Just like to add, one of the points is that, most of these gig workers, since they come and work with us on a particular projects, so the success measure of the project in terms of whether it was completed on schedule, what was the quality to cost ratio, how much was the stakeholder satisfaction ratio, what has been the performance against the business case. So if we as an HR are able to measure those points and make a case study out of it and then sell it to the departments, to the CFO, to the CEO, I'm quite sure, we would be better able to integrate the gig workers into the present workforce.
Sure. Thank you. Neelam, would you like to add? I can't see her, so I don't know. Neelam, would you like to add to the group on how would you measure success of a blended workforce?
So, to a large extent, Seema, it would be on what are they delivering. And as I would agree with what Saurabh said, that we are not hiring for cost. I would rather say that a person is bringing so much of value, and the speed at which things move are much faster than what I would have put a full-time employee, or maybe I would not have been able to afford or keep him engaged for years to come. But this person coming in would have added much more value to me and move the project much faster, give it more shape, than anybody else in the team would have been able to do that. So I think more than money, I would want to bring the expertise that this brings in. And especially, when we hire long-term or short-term coaches for our leadership performance. So we do, they come in for 6 months or 3 months or for 25 people journey or a 15 people journey. Now that expertise I don't have. Even if I'm paying a little more higher, the amount of investment that they do, the amount of leadership engagement that happens, the amount of sales performance that goes up is much, much far than the cost looking at it from a cost perspective, but more from a more engaging learning perspective.
Sure. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just summarize, I think, what we've spoken about for the last about 35 minutes, and then we can take some questions. So, some of the reasons why we've been able to kind of actually integrate gig employees is we need specific skills. There is a need for speed. Online platforms have made it easy to recruit, where earlier you couldn't. Our current, I think, younger generation has realized that they do want a work-life balance, and hence they don't want to be stuck with one job. They want multiple experiences. I think the big one was the trust piece that, that Neelam spoke about, which is really that we've started to also trust that people who do not work full-time can also still deliver, right? From a differences in terms of, what skills that gig employees versus full-timers, what I heard all of you say was that there isn't really a major challenge, however, which is current. We don't know over a period of time how that's going to play out. But the advantages is definitely, and I think Isuru brought out a really great practice, which is ex-employees coming back to do gigs within the company. They understand culture, they understand how the organization runs, makes it really, simple and easy to run with. I think some of the other points were the speed of bringing on board is something that helps us to be able to make sure that we deliver the goals we've actually put out for. And I think a big point that came out of all of you was the delivery of the experience. They come with so much experience, it's easier for them to deliver what you require from them. And I think from a practices, I think the big one that I heard was onboarding. Actually, two really big things. One is onboarding, which is when you bring them into the organization, introducing them to the organization as employees, whether they're frontline or they're full-time or they're in the corporates, making sure the onboarding process is thorough. It may not be as long, but it has to be thorough. It has to explain to the organization why they're there and what they're going to do. The second big one is defining their roles and defining the scope of the assignment, along with what, key KPIs and hence how they'll be measured becomes a really critical one. I think Neelam brought up a really good point on making sure that the L&D initiatives are available the way that they need them to be available. Whether it's, in person, whether it's online, however that may work. I think it's also about assimilating the skills. I think there was another point on aligning them to hypos, which Sonal brought out, so that you can still keep those skills integrated, within your organization, even after they leave. Yeah, I think that was, and I think the other one point was your talent acquisition functions, also being able to think gig employee hiring, because a lot of them don't think like that. So I think that's also an important piece to bring in. In terms of measuring value, Dhanashree was very clear saying P&L absolutely has to be able to measure it, but it shouldn't be based on the lowest cost. It should actually be based on efficient completion of project within a time and a space that you need to put it. Having output-based conversations with your organization. And I think Nandini brought up a great point on making it a part of manpower planning when you're doing strategic planning. So making it a part of the conversation within the senior leadership, so they start thinking about it differently. And, I think to Dhanashree's point, make it a part of culture, not from the cheapest possible employee, but really from a point of view of how do we get the work done, right? I think that pretty much captures most of the points that we've got on the page. With that, I think we can open up for questions. So I think there are quite a few questions. Meenakshi, can you help us with the questions?
Yeah, sure. Let me just read out the first one for you. It says gig workers for junior to mid-level. Does it also work for senior and leadership levels?
So yeah, I can take that from what I got from the panel, and then maybe I'll request Nandini to take the question on further. I think what I heard from the group was that it definitely works across senior level positions. Dhanashree was very, very vocal about the fact that it's still not integrated as a part of acceptance at the levels that it should be. Right? People still think about it saying ke saste mein kaam pad jayega to le lo. But I think it's about how do you make it, how do you make it more effective? And I think that's the whole strategic planning piece, integrating the conversations and seeding it with your leadership teams to make them understand what it means. That becomes really critical. Nandini, you want to just add to that?
Sure. So Seema, just to answer that question, the way I look at it is, it would work very brilliantly for, let's say, startups, like I was mentioning earlier too, right? They may not have the bandwidth to hire someone at a very high cost initially. So they may get someone at a, let's say a slightly lower cost, but they could have somebody who brings the expertise to build the base, build the foundation, someone at a very senior level who joins them, builds the foundation for them and hands it over to, mentors the person who is there and then hands it over to them. So I think it would work brilliantly for startups. Even in larger organizations at a certain, I won't say very, very senior, but definitely at, maybe a -1 level could work. Like we all mentioned, it's very project specific also at times. So if there is something just to be delivered for, let's say, a particular period, with some expertise required. For example, let me take an example of HR only. We want to put a compensation strategy together. We wouldn't want to, hire a consultant, an agency to do that. We might have an expertise in a gig worker, right? So get him or her on board and get the whole activity done. And we are done with that. So I'm just saying that it is possible. Like I said, it's very important to make it a part of the strategy of the organization and see what are the roles, what are some of the deliverables we are looking at based on which we decide whether we want a full-time or a part-time employee, right? And where gig workers really, really work is, you're not investing in a full-time employee, right? When you hire someone full-time, you're kind of actually increasing the cost of the organization year on year. whereas gig workers may come, deliver something and leave. So these are various things that we need to keep in mind and decide whether, irrespective of whether it's a senior role or a junior role, whether we need to hire a gig worker or not. But it definitely works, yes.
So the point that I'd also leave for the audience is, I think when you look at skills which are very specific or which are emerging, right? And digital becomes is one of those pain points, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are facing, because the skill that's required in terms of running digital is not keeping up with the pace at which digital is increasing. So specific things like that, you require exceedingly high skill. Those are great areas to hire gig employees. They come in, they fix a problem, they help the organization also kind of cope at a speed that's, appreciable. I think you can hire gig at all levels. Anybody else wants to add to that, or should we move to the next question? Because I think there are quite a few questions, right, Meenakshi?
Yes. So
let's move to the next question.
All right. Okay. So the second one says, is L&D intervention for gig workers really worth the investment in terms of time and money, since their requirement is anyway temporary?
Okay. Saurabh's got his hand up, so he's going to answer that one. Go ahead, Saurabh.
I think, yes, having gone through this, I can certainly say it's worth every, amount that we put, every penny that we put into it. Because these are highly, passionate workers. This is an area where your passion outlies your, intellect and your skill. It can be covered, but your passion matters a lot. Also, looking at the kind of technology and the kind of radical changes that have happened because of the pandemic and technology, you'd rather have someone who is passionate and skilled and who knows the technology piece, rather than going out and looking out for an agency or looking out for someone who has that only digital expertise. Here's a person who has both the digital as well as the functional expertise. So it's worth having the investment in terms of the time and money. It's also not going to be temporary all the time. Maybe the nature of your project keeps on changing. So you can use the same expertise for different projects and in different functions also. You are also not bound to use this person only for L&D. Because this person is from L&D, he or she also understands the assets of the business and could show some promises in other functions also. So I think it is really worth the investment, not only in L&D, but any kind of function. Look at it as a talent rather than the background and all. I mean, we've had people who come from, let's say, a banking background or a chemical engineering background, and then now are doing amazingly well in fashion and design, because that's their underlying passion. So they are useful for both, for the design also, and plus whatever they have learned academically.
Sure. Thanks, Saurabh. Would anybody else like to add?
I would like to add on the same. Thanks, Saurabh, for beautifully summing it up. Just wanted to add, and probably this would answer the next question also, as I'm able to see in the chat box. See, it is very important that when we talk about L&D interventions, it now, with the evolving workforce and also for gig workers, it never is that one size fit all. So when we are talking about designing an L&D intervention for gig workers, it is very important as to what are the competencies and skills we are training them on. So, and that would vary from the job or the project which they have been hired for. So something like, since for a gig worker, there are certain 4 or 5 skills which are of high importance. First being, they should be more collaborative in nature. They should have excellent people skills to handle different kind of internal customers. Their goal orientation should be high so that they can work unsupervised on clearly defined tasks. They should have excellent level of evolution and change management skills. So these are some of the things that probably if you train gig workers or gig talent force on, probably in the longer run, once they are through with the project and they want to continue the next project with the company, they'll come forward, and it would be kind of an employer branding for us as well. And it would help expedite the project for which they have been currently hired.
Sure. Thank you, Sonal. Meenakshi, should we go to the next question?
So while Sonal answered the question partly, so I'm just going to read out the third question, which says, what should be the basis for creating L&D strategy or vision if majority of workers are gig?
Okay, so Dhanashree, you want to take that question?
I'm going to say that I don't think it's any different than, what you would do otherwise. It's just that the span, your effectiveness of learning gets much, much sharper, crisper, and you would want this for any category of employees, isn't it? Okay. So therefore, how specific you are. And I remember that Alice in Wonderland thing, where do you want to go? So, and therefore, how does it matter which road do you take? So if you know, okay, what are the specific skill sets you want to impart, I think it's necessary to remove this mindset that, oh, this is a gig worker, I have to treat differently compared to any other worker, because more and more it's necessary the minute it starts assimilating as part of our organization structure, ways of working, part of workforce, it's necessary whatever is faster. Imagine for the sake of name, any regular employee would also want faster turnaround, right? That is what will give you maximum bang for buck. Okay, that is what in the previous session we saw about ROI impact. So it's no different for, any gig employee, as one would call it.
All right. Does anyone else want to add to this? Otherwise, I'll give you guys on a lighter note, right? And with all the years that I spent in McDonald's, one of the things that I always got asked is, with such high attrition, why do you spend so much money on training? And, on a lighter note, I used to always tell everyone, after 21 years, I've pretty much trained most of retail. So wherever I go, I get a discount. That's just on a lighter note. But I think the thing to remember is you're always going to continue to train for transferable skills. And L&D strategies are normally transferable skills linked. They're never specific functional skills linked. So when you're looking at whether your workforce is built with gig employees or it's built with full-time employees, you're really training them to do their jobs better, more effectively. So I don't really see that it'll really change how you look at it. All right. So I think that's the last question, right, Meenakshi?
Yes, just one last question, which says, how are L&D strategies getting changed due to changing nature of workforce?
Okay. So I think one of the points that Neelam brought out was the whole use of online and the ability to train faster at a time that they want to learn. So you no longer can train when you want to train, but you have to train when they're ready to learn. Right? So that was one thing. Anybody else wants to add on any other things that they've seen that are strategies that are changing from the past?
Seema, actually, to add to what you were saying, also the attention span when it comes to training, as we know, is also shifting massively. So gone are the days when you could deliver training that is 7-8 hours long. People are now looking for bite-sized trainings. So I think especially in a gig workforce, that becomes even more important, to try and get your message across from a training perspective in a very small time, in a very short period of time, so that you know that they have those transferable skills or the skills required to be able to perform their job. But I think this goes not just for a workforce that is connected to the gig environment, just generally in how we are evolving as the sectors are changing and how people are seeing the ability for people not to have that much of an attention span anymore.
Sure. All right. I think, and with that, we're actually almost at the end of our time, but I believe there's one more question, Meenakshi.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read that out. Gig workers are supposed to be trained and skilled, basically freelancers. Okay, why is then an organizational responsibility to train them, or rather skill them?
Okay, so I'm going to take that question, I think, and it goes back to what Isuru said right at the end, right? Which is, when you have a workforce, it doesn't matter what their employment contract says. There is a culture and there is a way of working that you want to build within your organization. And I think learning and development is one of those functions that enables organizations to get consistency. So I don't think this is just about skilling at the hard-coded level. This is also about how do you impart what expectations you have as a business. So I think it's important to keep sight of why you're L&D, right? And don't lose sight of that part. It's not transactional. It is much deeper than transaction. You guys have to hold on to that because that's what you're the heart of the organization. I had a boss who always told me, while operations delivers, training or learning and development is always they're the keeper of the keys. They're the ones that actually have the chabi. And it's important that you make sure that you constantly keep, adding that value back to your workforce. With that, I think
Seema, can I just add one more thing to that?
Yeah.
I think Nandini, we're out of time because I can see Hugo back and
Sonal wants to add something.
Meenakshi is sending me messages, so I know that they're on
fine.
time.
I think Sonal wants to add something.
Meenakshi, is it okay? Can you go, Hugo, for 2 minutes? Or
no worries.
We could.
Sure.
Not a problem.
All right, go guys.
So just wanted to add that you talked about organization. I wanted to talk about actually India's economy. So when they said, when the question asked that what is the need to train the gig workers, I just want to quote that there is a book known as Breakout Nations from Richard Sharma. And in that book, it is mentioned that if you want a nation to really break out, you have to attain $5,000 GDP per capita point. And that's really when the discretionary consumption kicks in and economy goes into a positive flywheel. And on the way to attain that GDP, our contingent workforce is immensely contributing. So as of now, if we talk, because, generally people are saying that, and they have that kind of an impression that for gig economy, it is basically for semi-skilled and moderate skilled workers. And the pay structure for them is really very, very low, somewhere around 10 to 15,000. And if we train them well and able to take them to a salary monthly, wherein they are able to draw a monthly salary of 30,000 rupees per month, then only we'll be able to achieve that kind of economy. So probably, from a holistic point of view, we are contributing to the economy if we are training the gig workers well. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks.
Seema, I'll just take 2 seconds, because this is, and keeping the time in mind, I'll make it quick. It's like if I'm getting an axe to be used, if I leave it sharpened, the next time I'm going to get the same axe, it will become easier for me to cut my wood. So therefore, it's very easy that we don't exploit people, but we explore their potential and leave them much more fruitful when they come back.
Sure. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I think it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you, Bhumika, for all the help. With that, I hand over back to Hugo.